Hey, my name is Matthew Ryan, Aussie author of the time travel series Till Time, and you're listening to There's a Time and a Place for That. You're probably wondering how you ended up listening to a podcast run by an author with a physics degree talking about the incredible cities and civilizations found throughout history. Well, your presence has been personally requested by the wise and revered Caesar Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. Probably. Or, more likely, you too are a fan of history and are in need of something entertaining to listen to as you drive to work, or even as you work. If that is the case, I invite you to listen on as we begin our tour of Rome, the Eternal City, and capital of an empire that stretches from the coast of Portugal to the shores of the Caspian Sea. This is There's a Time and a Place for That, Episode 1, The Eternal City, Part 1. It has been a long walk from Ostia, the Tyrrhenian seaport close to the mouth of the Tiberias River, but the countryside has now given way to the city of Rome in the distance. The sound of urban life has already reached our ears, but we are not quite there yet. To our right, as we walk towards the northern bank of the river, is the Circus of Caligula, also known as that of Nero, although it was finished by the Emperor Claudius. On the far side of this structure is the vibrantly green estate of Agrippina the Elder, granddaughter to Emperor Augustus and mother to Caligula. We can see some of the trees rising up beyond the circus, which has neither a large colourful tent nor any clowns, fun, scary, or otherwise. No, this circus is dedicated to two of the Romans' favourite pastimes, chariot racing and watching Christians get torn apart by animals. These people are very fun. It is here, 98 years ago, that St. Peter was crucified. While it has recently been closed, we can still see the turning posts, the central obelisk, and the grandstands through the arches along its walls. In 160 years, the centerpiece of the Vatican, the Basilica of St. Peter, will be built over the circus and the martyr's tomb, though for now, the 300-metre-long racetrack remains as it was. But we are not here for abandoned buildings. As we turn our gaze towards the morning sun, we see a new monument rising up from the once marshy lands of the Campus Vaticanus. It would appear to be a small forest atop a wide tower, but it is certainly not natural. The gold glitter amongst the green assures us of that. We approach, and the full size of this monument becomes apparent. It stands atop a square base made from shining marble, about 100 metres wide. The mausoleum, built by the Emperor Hadrian 30 years ago, is cylindrical, 64 metres in diameter and about 20 metres tall. Elaborate marble columns made in the Corinthian style, with leaf patterns and scroll designs carved into the top, rise up around the exterior, holding up the forest above. This garden, which supports dozens of pine trees, is surmounted by a towering marble pedestal, atop which stands the emperor, driving a 4-horse chariot, represented in glorious gold-lined bronze. From ground to gilded imperial crown, the entire building is probably 70 metres tall, forcing us to crane our necks back to see all of it. Today, it contains the ashes of Hadrian and his successors, Trajan and Antoninus Pius, and one day it will hold the imperial remains of Lucius Verus and Marcus Aurelius, the current emperors, and their successors, Commodus, Pertinax, Septimius Severus, and Caracalla. In the year 401 CE, it will be converted into the fortress known as Castel Sant'Angelo, later to serve as the Pope's home during the Middle Ages. Now, at long last, we can arrive at the city of Rome proper. The nearby bridge, Pons Aelius, will serve as our entry into the Eternal City. This three-arched bridge is covered in marble and interspersed with fancy columns bearing golden statues of the goddess Victoria. As we cross it, we pass into the Campus Martius, or the Field of Mars, where various administrative buildings and barracks await. The area we are in is open, with stables, a few houses, and fenced-off areas in which cavalrymen train on their horses. Known as the Trigarium, it is a piece of countryside within the confines of the urban sprawl, and the last such rural site we shall see on our tour. Before we continue south, our attention is drawn to the sounds of cheering and marching further east. Shall we see what all the commotion is? Taking a stroll along the southern bank of the Tiberis, we pass by structures that seem like modern apartment buildings. Called insulae, or islands, these buildings rise as much as 7 stories and can house a dozen families. Conditions are cramped and uncomfortable, but they are cheap and close to the central business district. Coming out of this suburb of winding alleys, we arrive at one of the major entry roads heading into Rome, the Via Flaminia. In the vicinity of this road, which leads north past the personal mausoleum of Augustus, there are a number of large buildings that warrant mention. The Ara Passus Augusti, an elaborate altar dedicated to Augustus's success in Hispania. The Solarium, an Egyptian obelisk set up to act as a sundial, bearing hieroglyphs carved into the sides and surrounded by bronze writing on the ground to tell the time and date. And the column of Antoninus Pius, the previous emperor, which has a wide marble base decorated with the images of a funeral procession and the ascension of the late emperor to the house of the gods, while the column itself is a 15-tall piece of shiny red granite. But none of these are the source of the cheers, partly because these monuments cannot cheer, but mainly because the source is coming from a little further south. Here, around the decorated arch built into the immense 20-metre-tall aqueduct known as Aqua Virgo, a large crowd has gathered. People of all classes are here to watch as a procession of military officers, led by a curly-haired man in the finest regalia imaginable, ride into Rome on horseback. The man leading them is none other than Lucius Verus, co-emperor to Marcus Aurelius, back from a successful campaign against the Parthian Empire that saw the Roman army conquer as far as the capital of Ctesiphon, near today's Baghdad. The arch he and his officers are passing through is the triumphal arch built in honour of Claudius's invasion of Britain back in 43 CE. The arch bears reliefs showing Claudius and his Praetorian Guard, the elite warriors sworn to the emperor, and we can even read an inscription stating the Roman Senate and people to Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, son of Drusus, Pontifex Maximus, tribunician power 11 times, consul 5 times, imperator 22 times, censor, father of the fatherland, because he received the surrender of 11 kings of the Britons, defeated without any loss, and first brought barbarian peoples across the ocean into the dominion of the Roman people. That's quite a fancy dedication. It is fitting, then, that young Lucius has chosen to enter Rome through this gate after his eastern victory, even though he never actually took part in combat against the Persians. Nevertheless, he looks thoroughly pleased with the crowd's adoration. We should let him enjoy the moment. Heading back west a little, we shall find ourselves in the cluster of very large, very official buildings that act as the centerpiece to the Campus Martius. First up is the Septa Julia. As we pick our way through the increasingly convoluted streets of a city that has naturally evolved beyond its original boundaries, we shall see this 310-metre-long rectangular building emerge out of the plain city blocks before us, its thick marble columns a refreshing sight. Originally a place for voting during the Republican era, this airy, column-filled space is now a market, which we will see as we walk through. Here, numerous goods coming from the western countryside and upriver from Ostia can be found. Artful pieces of Hispanic tin and bronze, apples, pears, olives and grapes, wines from further north in Etruria, known in our time as Tuscany, and furs from the distant lands of Germania and Britannia. The place is already quite busy despite the relatively early hour, and it takes a little while to wind our way through to the open doorways in the western wall of the building. Feel free to buy something as we do, though don't spend all your money. We have yet to see the forums on the far side of the Capitoline Hill. As we exit the scepter, our eyes are naturally drawn forward and upward to the building directly ahead of us. Rising up to a height of 43 meters and with an equal diameter, the cylindrical brick wall before us is astounding all on its own. As we look to our right, though, the rounded wall is met by a straight one. This part, as we walk in its direction, bears a marble facade with ribbed square columns, and as we reach the very front of this building, we can surely recognize it. This is the Pantheon. Built originally by Marcus Agrippa and reconstructed by Hadrian, we are now seeing it in its prime. The structure will remain largely in the same state in our modern time, albeit now acting as a Christian church rather than a Roman temple, though externally it is untouched by the normally cruel ravages of time. The front corners join the wall to a portico constructed from 3 rows of Corinthian columns holding up a large triangular roof known as a pediment, all in bright white marble. Along the base of the pediment is inscribed an abbreviated Latin phrase, M. Agrippa L.F. Cos tertium fecit, or in English, Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, made when consul for the 3rd time. Above the inscription is a decorative bronze relief of an eagle sitting within a wreath, a popular symbol of victory and power in Rome. As we ascend the steps to the portico and pass through the front row of 8 columns, we can see a further 2 rows of 4 columns standing before the 7.5 meter tall bronze arched doorway in the front of the temple. As we walk in, it would seem as though the interior is filled with divine light. The round room has a series of smaller portico-style structures around the walls, 8 in total, each having 2 columns and a triangular pediment in gilded marble. Between each of these is a hemi-cylindrical barrel vault, made from marble-faced concrete that helps hold the building together. The rest of the wall space, along with the floor, is made from granite and marble, creating a shimmering pattern of white, red, dark green, and yellow. Imagery of the various Roman gods, in particular Mars and Venus, can be found all the way around the sides. However, we should draw our attention upwards. Hidden from view outside due to the height of the building is a dome. Made from varying types of concrete, starting with denser volcanic stone aggregate and shifting to pumice at the top, the dome is a marvel of engineering. If we could put the dome on a scale, we would see that it weighed 4,535 tons, assuming the scale didn't break first. It is over 6 meters thick at the base and about 1 meter thick at the top, with 5 rows of square indents circling the dome to lighten it a little. At the very top is the source of the heavenly light we are bathed in. A hole, yes, a hole, known as an oculus, 8.88 meters in diameter, pierces the top of the dome, allowing sunlight, and occasionally rain, into the Pantheon. It is baffling that the Romans figured they could just leave a hole at the top of the dome and not worry about structural integrity, but it will last another 19 centuries from the time of our visit, so they got something right. The domed ceiling is also decorated in dozens of bronze rosettes, designed to resemble stars in the night sky. Most domes would require some kind of reinforcement, but amazingly, the Pantheon needs no such support. The concrete dome, which was cast in one entire enormous mould, and the specific design of the oculus hold together without ever collapsing. Interestingly, if we were here at noon on the anniversary of Rome's founding, the 21st of April, the circle of light from the hole in the ceiling would pass directly through the Pantheon's doorway. How on earth the Romans calculated that, I have no idea. As we exit the Pantheon, as hard as it is to leave such an incredible wonder behind, we will begin walking to the south along the paved street that surrounds the rounded exterior of the building. Directly behind, further into the cluster of vicious buildings in the centre of the Campus Martius, are the Baths of Agrippa, the same man who originally raised the Pantheon. This building, while nowhere near as awe-inspiring as the Pantheon, begins with a 25-metre wide round entrance and continues into a 110-metre long, 90-metre wide rectangular complex. It has been expanded by Hadrian a few decades ago, but one thing that remains from Agrippa's time is the statue at the front. Looking up at it, you may find yourself blushing. Or not, each to their own. This statue is of an entirely nude athlete in the process of scraping sweat, oil, and dead skin from his arm, a common practice in these times. It was sculpted from marble by Lysippus, a Greek man already 4.5 centuries dead, and moved here to greet citizens as they entered the baths. The fee to go in is only 1 quadron, the lowest value coin to be found in Rome, and as such, people of all classes, be they emperor or lowliest peasant, can bathe, sweat, and swim within its walls. The entrance hall is full of benches and couches for people to meet up and chat, beyond which are changing rooms and the baths themselves. As with most of the thermae within Rome, there are a series of different rooms with particular purposes used in the bathing process. After undressing, one would lather themselves in oil, which would help with cleaning the skin, after which they would typically exercise in a gym-like setting. After that, they would enter the caldarium, a hot pool, and a sudatorium that acted as a sauna. They would then make like the statue out front and scrape away all the sweat, oil, and dirt from their skin before heading into the frigidarium, a cold water pool. Throughout all of this, people would freely converse with one another, and many a business or political discussion would occur amongst the water and steam. Around the bath complex are a number of gardens and... What? No, we're not going into the baths themselves. Did you not hear me? They're full to the brim with naked people. I'm not describing that in detail. Have some decency. Anyway, Agrippa made sure to surround his baths with various gardens and colonnades for people to walk through and relax in. He even constructed a small lake to the west of the baths, as we can easily see, which is supplied by the Aqua Virgo, as are the baths themselves. Agrippa built the aqueduct with this exact purpose in mind, to take water from the hills to the east all the way to the westernmost district of the city. While people didn't usually swim in the lake, since old bath water was usually discharged into it, rich folk do often use it for boating. As we wander through these gardens, continuing in a southward direction, the sound of birdsong, the soft keening of the breeze, and the constantly shifting murmur of conversation surrounds us entirely. Now, as we emerge from the rows of hedges and flower beds, we see a new structure appear before us. To our right, a tall, semicircular amphitheatre is visible. Built from the usual volcanic stone and concrete with a marble facade and terracotta roof tiling, this is the Theatre of Pompey, Rome's first permanent theatre. The great general Pompey Magnus sponsored its construction years ago using the wealth he earned through his military exploits, and ironically, it would one day see the murder of his single greatest rival. Attached to the rear of this theatre is an expansive enclosed garden. Walking through one of the side entrances, a gloriously green space opens up before us. Much like those beside the baths we have just visited, we find here numerous pines, cypresses, and chestnut trees growing amongst beds of violets, hyacinths, marigolds, and roses. 4 wide circular fountains are set out amongst the gardens, cooling the space and creating the ambient sound of splashing water. Towards the eastern end, the direction we are walking, a series of marble steps lead up to a column-lined building with a gilded eagle spreading its wings from atop the triangular pediment. There is perhaps not a single more important building in all the world than this one. We ascend the steps, pass between evocative red granite columns, and enter through the bronze and chestnut doors. This is the Curia of Pompey. The focal point of this building, which is surrounded by benches on several tiers rising away, is the open space used by the Senate once upon a time for their meetings. It is here, on the 15th of March 44 BCE, that Gaius Julius Caesar, the once rival of the late Pompey the Great, and newly titled dictator for life, was stabbed 23 times by a conspiracy of senators seeking to restore the Republic. A marker, resembling a marble gravestone, put in place by Caesar's adopted son Augustus, indicates the spot where the murder occurred. The conspiracy ultimately failed, and Augustus became emperor in the image of his father, ending once and for all the Roman Republic. From the doors at the other end of the Curia, we emerge back into the sunlight of this fine summer day. We are no longer in a poorer suburb, rather, we are in the richer area of the city that extends beyond the walls close to the Capitoline Hill. The centremost of the 7 hills of Rome, we can see it rising up ahead of us, a complex of large, powerful buildings atop it. Let us head over to it. The streets here are growing gradually more and more crowded, with various nobles, bureaucrats, merchants, artisans, and servants making their way to and fro in the course of their daily business. Most people wear comfortable tunics covered by togas, cloaks, or the Greek-style chlamys, though those outside the more noble classes instead wear just the tunic. As we arc around the hill towards the north, a thick wall emerges from the spacious streets ahead of us. Built many centuries ago, the Servian walls are showing their age, with many cracks and vines snaking their way along the face of the volcanic stone. Nevertheless, they serve their purpose, and it will be another century before a new set of walls are built to encompass the growing city. We join the chaos of the crowds as we pass through a gate at the northern end of the Capitoline Hill and begin walking down the Via Lata, one of the widest streets to be found in Rome. It is about 3 meters wide. The Romans didn't have to deal with driving cars down their streets. In fact, as we can see, there aren't even any horse-drawn carts in Rome. By a decree of Julius Caesar, carts are forbidden from the city streets during daylight hours, helping to decrease congestion and reduce the number of people injured by careless drivers. We continue along the Via Lata, our eyes drawn left and right again and again by the myriad of shops and businesses that line the avenue. Here is a baker, beside it a barrel maker. 2 doors down and across the street is a leather worker. A banker works in the 2-story building just beyond it. As we curve around the base of the Capitoline Hill, the street effectively ends. Before us, opening up into a wide, beautiful plaza, is the Forum Romanum. This is the beating heart of the city. To our left are more plazas, namely those built by Julius Caesar, Augustus, Trajan, and Nerva. This area throngs with people and energy. However, for now, we turn our sights further right to the grand hill we have been circling. We pass by the temples of Concord, Vespasian and Titus, and the agricultural god Saturn, their elegant colonnaded facades watching imperiously from atop some mighty sets of stairs. In front of the temples of Saturn and Concord in particular is a tall column of red granite topped by a Corinthian marble capital and a golden statue of a goddess. As we pass it, we can read gilded inscriptions upon it telling us how far it is to some of the more important cities of the empire. Lugdunum, 664 miles. Carthago Nova, 1,340 miles. Mediolanum, 397 miles. Neapolis, 152 miles. Athenae, 733 miles. And Alexandria, 1,353 miles. This column, the Miliarium Aureum, was built by Augustus 200 years ago and marks the umbilicus of the empire from which all distances are measured. When we say that all roads lead to Rome, this is specifically where they lead. We continue up the path towards the crest of the hill, passing under the gaze of the 12 Olympian gods in their Roman forms. A portico, lined with marble and bronze statues, sees the gods of Rome organized into traditional pairs: Jupiter and Juno, Mars and Venus, Apollo and Diana, Neptune and Minerva, Vulcan and Vesta, and Mercury and Ceres. As we climb the slope, we come up to the tabularium just before we crest the hill. This building features many of the official posts of the Roman bureaucracy, as well as the record storage center, where thousands of scrolls and tablets are kept from decades past. The brickwork of the lower half of the towering structure gives way to 2 levels of arches and columns above, the highest being lined by statues within the arches as well as along the edge of the roof. Beyond that is the plaza in the center of the Capitoline Hill. There are a number of small temples and offices here, but 2 things draw our attention. The first is the Arx, or citadel, to the north. Surrounded by squat apartment buildings, this tall and impressive fortress is considered the last line of defense for Rome. Flags are used from here to alert the city of any incoming danger sighted from its 2 levels of walls. And it commands a view of the city second only to the hills northeast near the Praetorian camp and southwest across the river in the rural Janiculum Hills. But the more impressive sight atop the Capitoline Hill is the temple to the ultimate power in Rome, Jupiter Optimus Maximus Capitolinus, who sounds like he could transform into a pretty rad truck. It is a short way from the top of the street leading up the hill, and as we make our way towards it, the full majesty of its construction becomes apparent. It is built on the same foundations as the temple of the 6th century BCE, so it is not as revolutionary as the Pantheon, but we can recognize some similarities in its construction. 6 Corinthian columns, all made of marble of course, line the front, behind which are 2 further rows of 6, all holding up the extremely deep portico. On the left and right sides, further columns line the colonnades, making for 8 on either side. We come up to the marble-covered square before the temple, and new details become visible. A truly fabulous pediment shows Jupiter seated in a throne above a flying eagle, flanked by his wife Juno and his daughter Minerva, both also seated on heavenly thrones. To either side of them are 2 chariots, one driven by Apollo, god of the sun, the other by Diana, goddess of the moon. This relief sculpture is made entirely out of bronze and covered in gorgeous gold leaf. Above the pediment are 2 bronze statues of a 4-horse chariot, a quadriga, like the one we saw earlier atop Hadrian's mausoleum, and a 2-horse chariot known as a biga, though it is not necessarily bigger than the quadriga. At either corner of the roof stands another statue, the one on the left representing ferocious Mars, the one on the right displaying the regal beauty of Venus. The roof itself is not covered in terracotta tiles as most Roman buildings are. No, for Ultra Max Capitalist Jupiter, only solid bronze tiles covered in close to 400 tons of gold will do the trick. As we step between the front columns, the large doors of bronze ahead beckon us to enter the 40-meter wide temple. The floor and ceiling are just as richly decorated as the exterior. A vividly colourful mosaic spreads out beneath our feet, while gilded arches stretch out overhead. Numerous divine statues range along the walls amongst trophies collected from the varied lands of the empire, but none are as majestic as the seated statue at the far end of the hall. Made from ivory and gold, this idol of Jupiter, carrying a lightning rod and an image of the goddess Roma in either hand, was sculpted 100 years ago by the Athenian Apollonius. Were it standing, his crowned head would surely brush the ceiling, which is raised at least 20 meters above our own heads. Eventually, we return to the foot of the Capitoline Hill, our minds still swimming with the incredible sight of Rome's most important temple. All around us, the familiar sounds of a bustling city undulate and wash past. We stand at the western end of the Forum Romanum, the original forum built when the city merely encompassed the nearby Capitoline and Palatine Hills. Before us stands the original rostra of the Republic, once adorned with the prows of captured Latin ships. It is a curved platform, standing a couple of meters above the pavement of the surrounding plaza, used by public speakers to address the crowds who regularly gather in the forum. On the north and south sides of the forum stand many a market stall, selling all manner of foods, materials, clothing, tools, scrolls, and jewelry. The smell of fresh bread, fruit, olives, meats, and wine permeates our senses as we examine animal furs, linen, and even silk from distant realms. Veritable works of art designed to be worn are everywhere, made from Nubian gold, German silver, Egyptian lapis lazuli, and Greek amethyst. As the commercial heart of the city, it also hosts the various business dealings of the patron system of Rome, where noble folk trade in real estate, mercantile stocks, and political favours. We can see a number of such toga-clad men deep in serious discussion as they wander slowly through the forum. These groups of clients working for their patrons are perhaps organising trade deals or deciding on voting patterns to serve their masters in return for their continued positions of wealth and comfort within Rome. Further southeast, along the length of the forum, which is about 130 metres long, are the drains that lead down to the Cloaca Maxima, the sewer system that originally drained the marshy water that filled the valley in which we stand. A number of tall marble columns, crested by bronze statues of deities, emperors, and triumphant generals also dot the sides of the forum, and a bronze statue of the Emperor Domitian atop a noble steed sits right in the middle. Standing before this equestrian statue is an altar made from black marble surrounded by a low white marble wall and inscribed with a dedication to the first king of Rome, the eponymous Romulus, whose tomb is said to lie beneath the altar. The sides of the forum are hemmed in by two basilicas, that of Aemilia and Julia, which are 100-metre-long, two-storey halls fronted by double arcades of elegant colonnades that provide ample shade for citizens to sit and relax beneath. The basilicas were named for the senatorial families of Aemilius and Julius, the latter of which gave birth to the legendary Julius Caesar. The interiors of these basilicas feature some uniquely colourful marble flooring, alternating through green, amber, magenta, tan, and white. These spaces are used as further marketplaces, public meeting areas, and courts of law. We turn to our left, facing the north, where the 5 other forums of Imperial Rome are located. Built successively by Julius Caesar, Augustus, Vespasian, Nerva, and Trajan, these spaces are similar in size to the central forum, with the exception of Nerva's. Julius's forum is close to us, separated from the Roman forum and the Via Lata along which we entered the city by an open portico of 3 rows of columns surmounted by an elegant stone roof. We pass through this portico and enter the forum, looking around at the paved plaza that resembles a more orderly version of the space we were just in. It is here that we find the temple of Venus Genetrix, the version of the goddess Venus who began the line of Julius. According to legend, her son, the Trojan prince Aeneas, fled the ruined city of Troy and sailed to Italy, where he married a Latin princess and fathered Julius, the first member of the Julian family to which Caesar belonged to, and which vanished into history after the 2nd century. It is a stately temple, built from brick, with a marble facade, fronted by 8 columns and a simple relief sculpture of a group of people on the pediment. As we wander across the busy forum to it, we pass a number of statues. One shows Caesar atop a horse, though oddly, the horse appears to have the feet of a human. Another shows Caesar in a jewelled cuirass. A third statue is of the Emperor Tiberius, donated by the people of Anatolia, and a statue of the Empress Vibia Sabina, wrapped in a long shawl. Close to the Empress are 3 fountains arranged into a triangle which bubble cheerfully as we reach the foot of the stairs leading up to the temple. For some reason, stairs proceed from the arches on either side of the temple rather than at the front, leading to a narrow landing just before a further set of stairs takes us up through the columns and into the actual temple building. As we pass through, we can see that instead of being carved with leaves and swirls, these columns are decorated with imagery of the sea, waves, shells, dolphins and tridents, all relating to the myth of Venus's, or rather Aphrodite's, birth from the sea itself. Inside, the walls are decorated with paintings of Medea and Ajax, collections of gems, expensive pieces of armor, and further statues. The legendarily beautiful Cleopatra is displayed in gold here alongside Caesar himself, as is Drusilla, the sister of the ever so slightly insane Emperor Caligula. Most importantly of all, however, is the statue of Venus Genetrix. Draped in a mildly revealing peplos made from some kind of sheer fabric, she holds a baby Aeneas in her arms and is accompanied on her shoulder by Cupid. Sculpted by the Greek Arcesilaus out of the purest of Parian marble, it is a thing of exquisite beauty. 4 other forums surround Caesar's. Trajan's is the largest and newest, sitting up against the inside of the city wall where we entered from the Campus Martius. 4 semicircular structures are visible, 2 on either side of the wall enclosing the plaza, with a full-width basilica sitting at the far end. However, there is little to interest us there. It is a marketplace, public square, and legal court, just as with Caesar's and the original city forum. The same goes for Augustus's, which we can see directly north of us, though it contains the temple of Mars Ultor, or Mars the Avenger, rather than a basilica. Nerva's forum, just to the east, is the smallest, and it takes us no more than half a minute to cross. As we pass through, we can see the Temple of Minerva at the northern end and the Temple of Janus opposite it. Exiting through the portico to the east, we come to the Temple of Peace, also known as the Forum of Vespasian. Unlike the other forums, this is no simple plaza, nor a marketplace cross legal court. While it is large, square, and open, the colonnaded arcades along its sides are deep, and the central area is dominated by gardens rather than a paved plaza. Fountains, flower beds, and vibrant bushes surround the shallow mosaic-lined pool in the center of the forum. Amongst the beautiful greens are numerous marble pedestals, some displaying statues, but many bear a range of treasured artifacts. One such piece is a solid gold candelabrum with 7 branches that curve out from the central stand. As a highly important symbol of Judaism, we may wonder why it is being displayed in such a prominent position within a pagan temple. Unfortunately, the answer is a somber one. Nearly 100 years ago, the future Emperor Titus led a Roman army against the kingdom of Judea, seeking to destroy the rebellion that had seized control of Jerusalem. After months of siege, they succeeded, and the city was virtually torn down. Many treasures, including this menorah, were looted from Herod's temple and brought back to Rome during a triumphal procession that helped stabilize imperial rule. However, it also marked the beginning of both the Jewish diaspora and the spread of Christianity as a new religion across Europe. Not exactly the brightest moment in history, but certainly one of the most impactful. Let us have a moment of silence and introspection for the brutal wars that allowed for the Pax Romana, this period of peace we find ourselves in. That will do for episode 1. We'll return to Rome in 2 weeks' time for the Eternal City Part 2. I truly hope you have enjoyed our wander through these ancient streets thus far. If you had fun visiting the mighty monuments of the Pantheon and the Capitol and experiencing the lives of Roman citizens, you can give this podcast a like or share it on social media to help guide others to these tours of historical cities. And if you want, you can leave a comment to let me know what you particularly enjoyed hearing about or what other locations you'd like to tour in the future. Now, if you enjoyed exploring ancient Rome, you might also enjoy Till Time. The series follows best friends Imogen and Ashton as they adventure through the past, just as we are doing. The Sultan's Siege, the first book of the series, recounts the discovery of their time-travelling abilities and their exciting fight to escape the war between Crusaders and Ayyubids and make it back home. The sequel, The Frankish Fiel, follows their dive into Carolingian Francia and their quest alongside a royal assassin to end a plot that threatens to upturn European history. More books are on their way, but for now, you can find these first 2 installments on Apple Books, Google Books, Amazon Kindle, Kobo, and Barnes & Noble. Links to all of these can be found through the link tree in the description of this podcast. Thank you for listening to There's a Time and a Place for That, The Eternal City, Part 1, and I'll see you next time.